Welcome back to another episode of the Girl Dad Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Thompson. This episode's guest is Scott Mackenthun, fellow girl dad and outdoor writer who's been sharing stories from the field since 2005. Today, we talk about the challenges and rewards of helping our kids build a real connection to the outdoors. We share personal stories and insights on parenting, life lessons, and raising daughters who grow up with a lasting love for nature. Scott, thanks for joining. Do me a favor, tell me a little bit about how you grew up and how you got indoctrinated into the outdoors.
Yeah, I think my experience in the outdoors was just spending a lot of time outside. I was a farm kid. I grew up in Brownton, Minnesota on a farm, and we were about 3 miles, 2.5, 3 miles away from Lake Marion on Minnesota State Highway 15, and I used to ride my bike over that direction and fish as much as I could. I had two grandfathers that did a lot of fishing, and while our family didn't do a lot of camping or they did no hunting at all and did just a little bit of fishing, just having all that time to explore, having two supporting parents, running around in the woods, and then really getting into the extracurriculars when I was a kid. I was a 4-H kid, and 4-H really does open up a lot of doors. I started off in exploring the environment, fishing sports, shooting sports, wildlife biology, and it was actually an interview that I did with a fisheries manager at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources that kind of gave me my motivation and my career interest in being outdoors and being in natural resources and in fisheries science. In a nutshell, those were some of the influences and reasons and background in how I got into being as active as I am in the outdoors.
That's great. Actually, outdoors, that's what you do for a living. Explain a little bit about your current occupation.
Yeah. I ever since I was in the second grade, like I mentioned, doing that interview for 4-H, I knew that I wanted to work in fisheries and work for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And if you think about what kids say they want to do when they're young in that age and they're in elementary school, how many of them are actually doing what they said they were going to do? Because most of us probably said we wanted to be a superhero or a professional athlete or who knows. But I'm one of those lucky folks that was able to do what I set my mind to. I went off to the University of Minnesota, got a degree in fisheries, wildlife, and conservation biology, stayed on for a master's degree, and then I've been able to work for the past 17 going on 18 years for Minnesota DNR. Right, I spent the first 8 years of my career as a full-time employee at the Waterville Department of Natural Resources. Then I went to the Hutchinson office for 9 years, and then as just 8 months ago, I circled back to the Waterville office.
Nice. Now, you have two daughters, right?
That's correct. Yep. I have a 14-year-old Quinn and about to be 10-year-old Cora, of course, 8th and 4th grade. And yeah, try to get them out as much as we can, which I think, Greg, you and I are going to talk a lot about, right?
Absolutely. You're one of the only other people. My oldest daughter, actually, second grade, she fell in love with being a teacher. And now she just got her full-time position in the New Ulm School District. So you and my oldest Olivia are both second grade dreamers that are living your best life now. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. And yeah, I spent some time down in New Ulm. That's where I met my wife. So that's very cool. That's a great place if to explore with the Minnesota River running through there and lots of great schools.
Absolutely. Now, just like me, we're strict girl dads. No male influence in the house. I even gave up. I have a female dog. So
Same here.
that's, yep. Yeah. So we just gave up. One of the things, especially, my girls, 24, two 22s and an 18, they're all gone now. But I look at where you're at now, 10 and 14, heavily influenced by other kids, things going on around them. One of the things that that I struggled with that you're going through right now is how do you walk that line of pushing and knowing when just to step back and let them do their own thing and come back to it naturally? Because I'm imagining you're right in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think you have to give some conscious thought to it. Fatherhood puts you in that position. You're always I wouldn't say the right word is afraid to make a mistake, but you worry about things. I know there's that saying that worrying is like a rocking chair. It's something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Still, at the same time, I do think it's a good thing because it shows that you care, right? And like you said, Greg. I mean, it's the planning side. I want to make sure that these kids have every opportunity to do things outdoors that I wish I had, and to understand that there's a legacy component to it. And the beauty of it, of course, is in this what a time to be alive. Everyone has these opportunities if you're willing to put in the time, and there's not as much of a stigma. I can't speak to it. You and I can't speak to what it's like to be a female in the outdoors, but trying to raise them and give them those opportunities, all we can do is try to break through. And I think society is moving in that direction. It's becoming socially acceptable. And I look at my day job again, where I work for the folks that buy a fishing license in Minnesota. And we talk about declining participation. Well, if we're not alienating half our population right off the bat by saying this is strictly a male sport or activity, we can make up some huge gains. So I'm trying to live that, trying to get my girls out and do as much as they can. And before I drift too far off the question, like you say, I mean, you worry about, well, what do others people say to them at school, or how do their friend group that don't do these outdoor activities, how do they react to that? And I ask those questions of my daughters, and I know that there's a few others in our community that participate in the outdoors, and so they have some other friends that do it, or friends that think it's cool, which is nice to hear that it's supported. So far, it hasn't been a huge stumbling block, and again, like I said earlier, it's all about giving them those opportunities. At the end of the day, and for anyone else that's listening to us talk about this, that's in our shoes, or will be in our shoes, I hope that's something that you can take home. Is you took your girls out, Greg. I'm taking mine out. At the end of all this time, they turn 18. 18 and beyond, and they head out the door to whatever life takes them to next as newly minted adults. If they do not recruit to become anglers, if they do not become hunters, if they choose they don't want to camp or go on nature walks or hikes, or if they don't want to do any of those things, at the end of the day, if they look back at all the time that they spent, they said, well, I still had a really great time with my dad, and I know how much he cares about me. You still were a success. So I guess the message is shoot for the moon. If you miss, you'll still land in the stars.
Yeah. And, I don't know about you, but one of the things, I grew up kind of like you. I was 3 miles away from the closest lake. My grandparents had a lake cabin. I grew up on a dairy farm. So every morning you had to be there. Every evening you had to be there. So even when we went to the lake, soon as it would get nice, boom, time to go home and milk. Ugh. So i- because of that, my dad didn't fish. He didn't hike. Mom forced him to take me hunting. So I was very conscious of that. So then when I became an adult, like it was free for all. Every minute I could get, I was in the woods, I was on the water, I was somewhere. And then all of a sudden these kids show up. And it's like, all right, we're going to go, we're going to go, we're going to go. And, bringing them with and having them part was something that was super important. But the pivotal moment was I'm no longer doing these experiences for me. It's all about how am I in the moment and making it most meaningful for them. What are some of the things that you've experienced with Quinn and Cora taking them out? That all of a sudden it's like you realized, okay, if I was out here alone, I would have been doing this. But because the girls are here, this is a little bit different. And in order to be present, I need to make certain I'm doing this.
Yeah, yeah, a similar trajectory. Again, love my parents because they supported everything that I did, and similarly, like, boy, you try to get off the farm, and we milked cows and had hogs, and you'd come back, and some minor calamity will have happened, and that just meant you were never going to go again because disaster always seemed to befall you when when you went to the lake or you got away. So it made it hard to do. But yeah, I followed the same trajectory. I got off to college, and every weekend was a blank canvas to go, in the duck slough, or get on a stand or wet a line. So even my wife, we dated as high school sweethearts, and then we're married. And said, I just never saw this coming. Like, honey, remember that our first date, I took you ice fishing. I proposed to you while fishing. Our wedding song was Fishing in the Dark. What did you miss along the way? But she lived through when that passion was just on fire, and I was gone every weekend and trying to keep her happy to get out and do all this stuff. But you're right. The the focus really shifts, and it's a fun thing too. I think, back thinking about just broadly about being a parent, and again, worrying and making sure, like, what do I want to accomplish, what do I want to instill in these kids, what morals and ethics and values are important, how are we emphasizing faith and education and arts and athletics and outdoors and all these things that are just fundamentally really important to us as people in our family. What do we want to pass on? And the outdoors was definitely a big part of that. And yeah, it became about making those memories with them. And I've just been blessed to have so many of those. Like, what you do personally, you set it aside, and maybe I'll pick it up again someday. Or maybe I'm fortunate that my kids are still young enough that there's some things I can't take them on the full blown adventure, but in a few years, we have those things planned. And the other thing that pops into my head when you talk about how you know give the kids these opportunities is just, it's not an act, right? Like,
Right.
it's deliberate. It becomes a social and behaviorative norm that you're going to go out and you're going to camp and you're going to fish and you're going to do these things. And it's not something that catches you off guard if you're only doing it once or twice a year. Like, it's not foreign to you. So the more familiar the kids are with it, it becomes a lot more comfortable. And I think that helps them learn and grow as well.
I don't know about you, but one of the other things that I always took advantage of is we always had to drive because we lived in the cities, moved to the cities, girls went to school in the cities, and we'd have to drive to whatever adventure it was. Taking advantage of that road time to have discussions. One of my biggest accomplishments as a parent, this is going to sound so silly, is one of the things I always told the girls was you only get one chance at a first. So make certain that it counts. You only get to meet someone for the first time once. You get one first kiss. You get one first everything. I got a call at 2 in the morning. One of the girls wasted her first kiss on a jerk. But that just speaks to, it's not just about the activity that you're going to do, but it's the opportunity to have them even on the drives, and even those messages, and being present. So what are some of the things that you take advantage of as you have them out? You talk about working on faith, you talk about all the different life lessons. Are there certain themes that you focus on when you have them? I mean, one of the things that I like is I always like splitting them up, right? When you get one-on-one time, how does it how do your interactions different between Quinn and Cora, the 10 and the 14-year-old?
Yeah, trying to make opportunities for both, and trying to follow a similar roadmap, although it's not easy, because they're such different kids. I mean, you've lived it, Greg. Every kid is so different. You learn that the hard way. So as much as I want to follow that roadmap, I can't always. It doesn't always come out the same way. Like, well, let's see. Quinn was really mature, so we started turkey hunting in the second grade, and Cora, we did start at the same time, but by all accounts, she's probably not as mature, so I probably should have waited 1 or 2 years. But we're down that road where the kids came along, and they just came along for a couple of years, and then when I felt like they were ready, then we would go out and we had to practice, practice, practice. Like, there's one of those life lessons. Like, you owe it to the game that you're pursuing that you're going to take a clean and ethical shot, and you're going to practice with your firearm, and that you're going to get to that point. So really jumping ahead of what firearm safety training they would have. preparing the preparations. You can do that as a group and teaching them how we're scouting, whether it's remote scouting or actual scouting in the field, looking around, putting up trail cameras. It's just putting in your time, and then on like the fishing side, it's yeah, we gotta. It's not always gonna be they're hopping in the boat. That this society today is like swipe right, push a button, take a pill, and everything's fixed. And like, are we losing out on patience? And I've talked with other outdoorsy parents that are pretty good at what they do. Not I can brag on my buddies. They're pretty sharp sticks. They're pretty good hunters. And we have this question of like, did we make it too easy because we put it on a pedestal for them, right? Like we knew where the fish were and we had all the gear and we handed them the rod and all they had to do is cast it and catch the fish. Or, well, you have to incorporate some amount of work. So I definitely tried to put on some tough love with the girls and taking them out to, no, you're gonna tromp through the snow behind me. You're gonna have to pull the portable fish house out. You're gonna have to do the work. You're gonna have to put up with the mosquitoes biting you when you climb underneath the boat trailer to pull all the fragments of vegetation off. It's all those things that happen along the way.
Yeah. How big of a role do electronics play? At 10 and 14, I'm imagine they're in it. Are you taking advantage of their want to use electronics to incorporate that into things that you're going to do?
Yeah, I think so. We I think about I don't want them to spend a bunch of time on screens, but definitely like when we travel to places, like, boy, you're missing out on all this great geography. If it's a short trip, then I want you to like be aware of your surroundings. If it's a really long trip, well, okay, you can be reading a book or be on your phone or doing whatever. Or when we're camping, not having screen time, not bringing those devices along and yeah, but to your question on the fishing side, like absolutely, I've got flashers. I do have a live scope that I use primarily in the winter, so they get to see what that looks like. I mean, I think explaining to them, and if I didn't have the live scope, it would be the same thing, right? Like they would learn that if it's 2D on a boat or a flasher in the winter, we're not starting fishing until we know there's fish in the area. So even with the live scope, I mean that's sort of a teachable moment of we're not just gonna there's a method to our madness of how we're going about this and reading water. If you're whether it's a stream or a lake, thinking about the seasonal elements. So that's probably pretty early for 10 and 14, but if they continue to hang with it and are willing to put the time in, we'll get into all that. We'll figure out how to do all this.
Have you, one of the things, with my girls being older, I do have younger nieces. So letting the 5-year-old pick up onyx fish. All right, hey, Cora, we're fishing this lake. What do you want to fish? Choose the species, explain where we should go, have her pick the spot, and interact at that level. I mean, it's if the want to use electronics is there, let it be valuable and let it lead them to where we want to lead them, right? That's the same kid. We got her a Garmin watch for Christmas so she can track her steps. Now she doesn't do anything. She doesn't go to bed until she has all of her steps. But her older sister, I actually share my game camera photos with. She gets them because she comes up and hunts with us. City kid, no one, her mom and dad don't hunt, but she wants to hunt. So, we got her hunter safety, got her a gun, and now she remotely, will look at Google, will look at Onyx, will pick spots, put up cameras, and she gets to see. It's just a way to use electronics to drive them to what you want them to do. Is that something you've thought about with the girls?
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing I pick up in your story, Greg, is how important choice is. Like participating in the process, not just being
Yeah.
handed this and going with it. Like you said, they're picking out spots on Onyx. They're looking at what's happening on the trail cameras, and then that just there's more choices that come down the road. Like what stand would you prefer to sit on? Where do you think we should be set up for for turkey hunting? well, the wind is coming from this direction. Well, what do you think we ought to work this field over for pheasants? I mean, that giving them choices. Where do you want to fish? You're in charge today. Pick out the spots where we fishing. So, giving them some choice, they appreciate it as young people, and then I think they develop some critical thinking skills along the way.
Absolutely. So what are the favorite outdoor activities of the girls right now?
Quinn, I would say it's definitely hunting. We started off with turkey hunting, which is seems to be the gateway, and we just had her shooting bows for fun, like a youth bow. And then our school has a national archery in the schools program, and she really fell in love with that. So that took off. Then she wanted to shoot trap. We did some of the fishing leagues, and she'll be the first to tell you she prefers hunting over fishing, which I find sort of comical because she says to me like, "Well, Dad, there's all these times that we'll fish and it'll be slow and it's boring." It's like, wait a minute. Boring for you is like waiting 30 minutes or an hour, but to have a bite versus I've seen you sit on stand for 40 hours and not have a deer come by, but you're saying that's more exciting. So maybe we're wired a little bit different that way, but and then Cora, it's getting dirty, getting her hands into everything. She definitely enjoys the camping element, and she's hunted with me for a little while just for turkeys again because she's so young, and that's been our gateway. She's enjoyed the fishing element, but she probably isn't quite as gung ho as Quinn is, so I'm kind of waiting to see how that's going. And it's again two kids that are wired completely different. And I think about when you're harvesting an animal for keeping fish, or we're if we're shooting the first turkey, and I had rehearsed this in my head and I had gone through it with Quinn, so I thought it was gonna be the same run through with Cora about how well, you've practiced and you've taken a life, and it's been we are making a conscious choice to do this. Where does your food come from? And, but at the same time, we can be sad. We'll say a prayer. We're going to honor this animal's life in taking it. And that it was real serious business. And I thought that harvest went well enough, but I know I heard from my wife that she still had some misgivings about taking a life. But it is serious business, and I think it's to be understood. And again, I think it comes back to just the differences in maturity level a little bit there.
Yeah. So just for everyone, why is turkey hunting your gateway to hunting? What is it about turkey hunting that makes that be your go-to?
Well, I can't speak to it because I was an adult onset hunter, what most families do to get established with hunting, but pieces that I've written on this, or excuse me, pieces that I've read on this topic talk about, well, 1 or 2 generations ago, small game hunting, rabbits and squirrels were the gateway, and then you graduated from there, and that's become less and less common in our country. I think small game hunting, or at least harvest, is a lot less compared to what it used to be. Turkeys, I would argue, are kind of the gateway because most states have great youth programs like Minnesota has. Doesn't require the firearm safety. You just need a responsible adult along. And then the advancements that we've seen with uh, the firearms and just the accessories for it. For example, and I've written about this a fair amount. For the audience's benefit, Greg and I are part of the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers. We're content creators. I do some outdoor writing for 20 years actually. I've been writing newspaper columns, magazines, freelancing, electronic media, you name it, doing writing wherever I can, and I've written about this topic that you absolutely can get your kid into turkey hunting really easily. You can buy a blind that can hold two people very inexpensively. That's going to mask a lot of movement for a kid. They can get away and not have to pay as close of attention if you're there. You can put it in a good looking spot. Turkey populations, at least up here in the north, are in pretty good shape at a national level. I know there's places that they're noticing declines, but we're in pretty good shape up here in the upper Midwest. Um, there's such an amazing element, at least with the spring season, that you're in the woods, you get to hear it wake up. You typically will at least see excuse me, hear turkeys, which a lot of times defines satisfaction for hunters when you take Natural Resource Agency surveys about your satisfaction. Most hunters report being happy with a hunt if they hear birds, even more happiness if, or satisfaction if they see birds, and then of course the cherry on top is if they harvest one. So, because the youth seasons are so long, you can hunt the entirety of the season, so it gives you more bites at the apple. You can play that around the weather. You want to take those kids out when the weather is favorable. You can now shoot using 410s, which is a lighter recoil, and so you can pick something smaller they can handle. I can put it on a tripod so they don't even have to hold the gun up anymore. They just have to swivel it and turn it. There's just so many reasons that, and they get to do the calling. They can choose how they want to put decoys out. Like, it's the full, sensory overload, awesome experience that I think at the end of the day gives them a great experience, and it's usually something that is formative for them that they always remember fondly.
Absolutely. So when you set them up, just because we have listeners of all varying levels and capabilities, right? So are you starting them at their inception of turkey hunting with a 410 now? Is that what you're standardizing?
That's what I'm saying, and one of the things I wrote this I wrote this long sort of like Bible for how to get your kid into turkey hunting, and we talk about scouting and shooting practice. So just quickly on the shooting practice, because you asked about the gun, I would start them on a BB gun. I think one of them had won a pink BB gun at a waterfowl banquet, or whatever it was, and we shot that pink BB gun on summer vacation just at paper targets and pop cans and whatever we could. And they got a lot of familiarity with lining up a site, open sites, and when they start getting good at that, then you can make the jump up. Now you put the actual turkey, you know, high high visibility. You hit the target, you see the fluorescent green mark. You put up one of those turkey head shooting targets up on a piece of cardboard, and you start with the BB gun. When they're comfortable with that and they're hitting, right in the head and neck area where you show them, shoot them in the waddle, shoot them in the bubbles. When they are consistently hitting that, and then you move them to the 22, and the 22's got a little more of a pop, but it doesn't have any kick or recoil, but they get used to that loud bang. And then from there, you move them to the 410, and you explain, hey, you were shooting a single shot, now you're shooting a whole collection of shot together, and we're gonna shoot this at the turkey that you're gonna be able to hit the head and neck, and you'll have a quick kill with it. But it's important for us to be a good marksman, and that's why we're bumping you up. And I don't make them hammer on that 410 over and over. They shoot it once or twice, and they show me that they're proficient with it, and then we're done, because we don't need them to have, to beat themselves up, or have, you know they're all of a sudden they're gun shy because they've been kicked too hard, or they got a bruise on their shoulder. Because you and I both know, and all hunters know, in the heat of the moment, they're not going to think about it. They're just going to get up and shoot that thing. They're not going to be worried about the kick or the sound or anything. But you have to move them up. And believe me, you'll make mistakes. The kids, you'll watch them, they'll start jerking away or pulling their head off the gun. And then you go back a level and you start over again, and you just make it as simple as you can. But it's be patient as a father, take your time, and just have a plan for it. And don't be afraid if things don't go to a plan. Give yourself a long runway.
That's awesome. That's great advice. As far as deer hunting, so I'm a big fan of a 7 mm 08, because just like you with obviously they go through the progression, right? You don't just hand them a high power rifle, but similar trick. I like you can get the half loads for the 7 mm 08,
Mm.
so you can condition them so that when you're actually out, they're not expecting the kick and the adrenaline will mask it. So do you have a standard caliber in mind for the girls for deer hunting?
So it's funny you say that. We're down in slug country, so
Ah,
the oldest that shoots, which is changing here in Minnesota. For anybody out of Minnesota, we've got a dividing line where the state is split in half. Prior to the year 2026, it had been that way, where if you were south of, I believe it's what, Minnesota Highway 210, you needed to use a slug gun, shot, or needed to use a shotgun, and north of there you could use a rifle. A law was passed a couple years ago, and it takes effect here in 2026, where you're allowed to use a rifle, but they are giving the counties discretion, which I'm actually considering writing about this because I have talked to two different county commissioners in two different counties who I've built relationships up with over time, that they have gotten flooded with phone calls about people have very strong opinions about this. So we could be seeing almost no adoption of that. We could be seeing, you know, straight wall cartridges. We could be seeing a lot of different outcomes, but I digress. The to your question, I've anticipated it because I'm hoping to be able to do out of state trips in the future, and so I want to start with something simple. That's why I'm actually looking to get uh, either a 450 Bushmaster, 350 Legend, a straight wall cartridge to start without as many foot pounds, energy, and just see how that goes for my oldest, and then kind of go off of there. But you make a great point about watch what your loads are, and maybe start with some target shooting. But I'm lucky that the oldest has had a lot of time on long guns, not so much on rifles, but we'll put the time in at the range, and I think we'll build that level of comfortability. It's just understanding you got to have a roadmap.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about hunting and fishing. You've mentioned a lot about camping. Is that something the girls still like to do, or maybe the 10-year-old does, maybe the 14-year-old? Is it something you still do a lot as a family, or is it getting harder now that they're getting a little older?
I think we kind of got them hooked on it, to be honest with you, Greg. I mean, that's probably going the best. We do some car camping.
Wow.
Yeah, we do some car camping, and probably it's gone so well because my wife is a big believer in it. My wife does not hunt and she fishes very little, but she's all in on the camping. So maybe it's that family element, but they're all in. We love to travel around, visit different state parks, and then when I felt like my oldest was ready, we did a 3 mile hike into Voyagers National Park, and I took her out to Shoepack Lake, which is somewhat famous or infamous in the Upper Midwest as being the home of a particular genetic strain of muskies. Now, the thing that makes them unique is there's tons of them. They don't grow very large, but they're at some of the highest densities, and you can go into these lakes that have shoepack strain muskies in them, or you can go to the, shoepack lake proper, and you can have yourself a day. You can be God's gift to muskie fishing just because there's so many in there and they bite so well. So I took my oldest in on a hike-in trip to fish muskies, and she also went with me a couple years ago on her first Boundary Waters trip, and just giving her those opportunities. And to be honest, blessed to live close to the Minnesota River. And my favorite thing, in fact, I was kind of bummed this last year. 2025, the Minnesota River was basically in flood stage from the 1st of June through the middle of September, the entirety of the summer. I mean, I got 1 week of fishing, and was so excited. My kids are getting old enough; I can finally get away and bring them along a little bit. And they've done quite a bit of river fishing with me, but I look forward to the sandbar camping that comes from the middle of the summer and on, typically when your precipitation ends and things start to dry up and expose your sandbars. And I did not get to sandbar camp this year, but I've got great photos. We've been out on sandbars where you get to, sleep in a tent, and you get to see deer and hear owls, and hear and see beavers and raccoons, and everything under the in God's green earth is coming out there and making noise or running around. In Minnesota, in the Minnesota River is one of the places that we can fish with 2 lines. So, there's 4 of us out there. There's 8 fishing lines. Finally, I have to pull the lines. We're catching so many fish, and I can't go to sleep, so I got to pull the lines in. But I usually will leave a couple out with a big live bait. And the first year we did it, woke up to a screaming drag, and we caught a nice flathead. And then the most recent time I did it, my wife actually had to travel somewhere, so the girls were with me, and Jackie was not along on the trip. And I sleep like a rock. I can sleep through about anything. And evidently, I slept right through that clicker going off. I wake up in the morning and I walk outside, and there's a track mark from our tent all the way down to the river. where this fish had hauled off my rod. Well, luckily I got to the edge of the water, and I looked down, and my rod, by the grace of God, was still laying there. I picked it up, and there was still a fish on it. It
No
ended up being,
way.
yeah. I called Cora over actually. There's a picture of her in her pajamas and Quinn standing there, the two of them holding this giant channel catfish that grabbed our live bullhead. I'll have to send you that photo. It,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean they just enjoy it. Like they're the muck in their toes and sleeping in the sand and looking out at the stars. So the campings come very easily, knock on wood.
Yeah, well, and that's such a big thing, right? Even just walking in the woods for, not everyone has the opportunity that we have. I mean, you work for the DNR, you have access to a bunch of different things. You have your place up in Big Fork. I live in the middle of the swamp. Like we can just go out and get lost. Even for someone who lives in the city, just to go out and take their kid for a hike, take their daughter for a hike and point out a bird, I mean, even the apps, the bird apps, I'm not a birder, but we had friends stay with us and they were giant birders. And the apps where you just stop and all of a sudden, oh, these 8 birds are right here is so interesting that the opportunity to get just introduce anyone at any level to nature it's a very unique time to do that and everyone should take advantage of it. So we've been going for a while here, Scott. As you think about this, you think of, you found out you were having a daughter, you found out you were having a second. How'd you process that? Because like I said, I came from a family of all girls, and it's like, holy crap! Like, how do you get ready for this? You've waited to be an adult. You've waited to be in the woods. Like, how'd you get your arms around this and prepare? Because I've been talking to a lot of people that they've got daughters on the way. They're planning. They're trying to figure out how they're gonna just figure this out from the get go. What do you tell someone the first time that they hear, "Hey, you're going to have a daughter," and how can you help that preparation?
Yeah, and I just gotta say, you hit the nail on the head there too, like with the apps and stuff. It's kind of a callback to what we talked about earlier, where you have this technology, take advantage of it. We've sat in the blind and ran the Merlin app, and you have
Yeah.
all these you have these identification tools now to be able to, like iNaturalist, to be able to look this stuff up. So your time in nature can be even more revealing, and just get that natural curiosity going, and answer those questions. So I think that's an awesome mention for everyone, whether you're highly experienced or don't have a ton of experience.
Well, yeah, that's the Merlin app. I'm glad you said that because I couldn't remember it on the fly. That's exactly the one. And also foraging, right? Not that you have to pick anything or eat it, but just the identification. To walk through the woods purposely is just a way more engaging way of taking a kid in the woods. What is, because the mushroom identification apps, everything has an app, and it's just that tie to them understanding and wanting to learn more about it.
Oh,
So
absolutely. But no, it's funny you asked that, because my wife and I had envisioned 2 or 3 kids, and when it was the two discussion, it was like, well, I want one of each, and then I don't care after that, if we go to three, whatever, but we want at least one of each. And I was hoping for a boy, got a girl, then a few years down the road was hoping, all right, this will offset the other one, and we weren't. We did find out, and it's like, oh, I got a girl again. But what I will tell you is 2 things. One, when Quinn was born, I wrote this letter that I still have, and I published it. It was published in one of my early columns about what I promised to do as a father, and that she would have any opportunity that anyone would have. And I'm happy to say we're at that, you know 14 years later, we're at that point where those promises have been kept. And similar mindset for Cora. I think what's been really great is, again, I think you worry a lot about if you're doing the right things as a father, are you making mistakes, and you worry about things. I mentioned about that worry log. You're always worrying, which really just means that you care. And I think that's, I used to worry that, well, am I missing out on something with not having a boy? Well, I've been a father long enough and have been around other kids and talked to enough other parents that they'll tell you, like, you really don't have any control. It doesn't matter if it was a boy or a girl, they could be into all kinds of different things. You can't have a preconceived notion of what a kid is going to be or do, but all you can control is what you do as a parent, what you put out there, what opportunities and experiences you give. So, happy to say we've been able to do a lot of that with our two girls, and maybe a lot of that will amount to them both being lifelong anglers and hunters and outdoor enthusiasts, and maybe it won't. The jury is still out for both of them. I hear stories, and I could see this being a podcast discussion item for you and other guests in the future of that callback. Those kids go away, and then maybe they don't do it for a while, but then they come back to it, or maybe they never took to it when they were young. With like, hey, Dad, I do want to try this now. So you have to spark that curiosity, and you always have to leave that door open. And we'll see how the future goes for my kids.
That's such a great call out. And, you mentioned faith earlier. It's kind of the approach that we took with faith as well. Our kids' Sunday school, you had to get confirmed, but once you're confirmed and once you're out of high school, it's all on you. The hope is that you come back, but you've set the foundation. And that's what we've talked about on this podcast is how do we set the foundation so that no matter where these kids go, they have the opportunity to come back and pick it up at any point, because they may get busy. You never know where they're going to end up. But when they have kids, they're going to think back, remember when Dad took me camping? We stayed on the sandbar. We caught that channel cat. I want to do that. And maybe their husband isn't an outdoors person, but they can lead the way. And you've done a great job of setting that standard and allowing them the opportunity to do that later on in life.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, so perfect. Well, Scott, I think we'll wrap up. What I'll do is everyone look in the comments. I'll put a link to the article that you wrote if you'll share that about the promise, and then the picture of the girls with the catfish. And everyone, Scott Mackenthun, his information will be in the description. Links to his articles. Thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it, Scott.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Four girls running free down a gravel road, barefoot dreams where the tall pines grow, each one different, strong and true. I just thank God I get the view, from sunrise lines to firelight hours, watched them bloom like wildflowers. This is our story, wild and true. Girl, dad, outdoors, raising daughters with a view.